Is ESD a scam? This is an article I wrote a week ago. It says, is ESD a scam? Over-mentored, underfunded. Entrepreneurs say it's an industrial complex that uses them as bait, feeding corporate staff and consultants, leaving only crumbs for them. It's posed as a question. However, in the article, I'm saying it is a scam under the following, under the following principles, which I will touch on a bit. So this follows someone shared a post on LinkedIn. It had, the now famous video of Skinny's Boo Socks, or Spusi Songweni of Skinny's Boo Socks, where he was on SABC. And he was saying he needs money. He's tired of advices. He needs money because at that stage, his businesses, the demand was such that it needed him to, expand, make more merchandise. So I shared the post. The post had the sentiment that our South African entrepreneurs over-mentored and underfunded. I shared the sentiment that it seems that it's a scam. Surprisingly, a lot of people within the ESD space were agreeing, saying that it's a scam, and privately, there were those who did agree, but in private, because some of them work in the ESD space. I've worked in the ESD space. So ESD stands for Enterprise Supplier Development, but for this context, I will refer to the ED in ESD, which is Enterprise Development. This is the set of money that corporates allocates to enterprise development, as it were. And most part it's voluntary, but if you don't comply with it, there are certain, opportunities that those businesses cannot access, more especially when it has to do with doing business with the state. Anyhow, that's that. So it's all under the framework of BEE. I would say that I suspect that ESD is the most corrupt of the whole BEE scheme. It's essential, really, that entrepreneurs get funded, and through a mechanism like ESD is very much needed, because entrepreneurs need funding, right? Now, when I say a scam, the principle is quite simple, in that I suspect that for the most part, the budget that a company allocates to ED, enterprise development, I say 50. I suspect that in most cases, over 51% of those funds go towards not the entrepreneurs directly, but in a lot of programs that they organize for them. It could be accounting, it could be teaching them about certain business principles. Now, it's fraudulent and scamish if more than 50% of the allocated funds of a specific company do actually go to the support mechanism rather than going to the entrepreneur. I'll give just a simple framework. When, let's say, venture capital companies, they raise money from their investors, and then usually this is the accepted framework, because investors like to see most of their money going to work. Roughly around 2 to 3% per annum goes towards the administration and support of the VC firm. So, and about 5 to 7 years, 5 to 10 years, it just depends. So essentially 30% of, if 1 million was raised, 30% of that would go towards the management. It's the management fee. And then majority of the funds do go to the businesses that actually get invested into. Now with ESD, I suspect is the other way around. Although this is not an investment, but it's still a business, right? But it's a support business. Okay, so if I call it an industrial complex, if then over 51% of those funds from an individual company go towards the support and management of that ED, enterprise development program. Because essentially, I see it as, people who come from corporate, they get into this ESD space because, well, they were connected to corporate and they've got the status leverage to, set up those structures that, they get awarded those programs. And now if 51% of the funds go to them, it is just an industrial complex. It's just scamming entrepreneurs. It's just, and you see, things get hidden with language. I'll give an example. I could say, diversity here, we are empowering women of color, and then whatever the color mechanism is. Let's say they issue out 10 million, or the program will cost 10 million. You would find that in most cases that the said woman, they can use the word diversity, empowerment. The said women only get a fraction of those funds, meaning way less than 50% of that 10 million. You could say, if it's 5 of them, maybe they're getting 1 million is getting divided between them to use directly in their business, and the rest gets lost as overheads, or call it support or whatever. And then they hire all these sort of consultants, accountants. Here's the thing about being a startup: you just can't afford certain caliber of accountants. And within an ED program also, if you can't afford it, well, you can't afford it as a startup, but you shouldn't be afforded such an accountant. The mechanism should be whichever, say, accountants get afforded for such a program, it should be in such a way that it's everything, the allocation that goes towards the support and development, everything still should be a fraction of the entire fund, not greater than it. And I am a technical writer, and you could say I'm a linguist to an extent, and I know, like, I use the word diversity. They can use diversity just to defraud or use women as sort of posters of a certain program. They can throw all sorts of terminologies, interventions, pre-investment readiness, support, optimization, all those sort of terms. But business is it's not theoretical, right? There's a profit, there's a loss, right? There's no ambiguity in this. So even a support fund should more or less operate kind of like a VC setup, wherein only a fraction goes towards support and development, meaning the rental of the institution that hosts the program, the enterprise development program. If not, then I guess I used Afrikaans there. If not, if not, then like I keep saying it's a scam, and you can't justify it. Whatever fancy terms you can go and borrow, it's still not that. I call that type of argumentation Marxist. Marxists, it's people who theorize so much that they think that whatever intellectualism they come up with should work in the real world without checks and balances. And in an enterprise development situation, the checks and balances is purely that over 51% of those funds should go to the entrepreneurs directly as investment, whether they're putting it, as working capital or they're buying equipment. Otherwise, from the onset, the whole scheme, the whole program per company, I keep saying, it's fraudulent and it's unwise, right? I don't care what justification you use, terminologies from an MBA, whatever. It's scam, man. If you're taking over 51% of said funds as support and development. And I don't know if this will come off as controversial to some people. It's not. You need a mechanism of measurement, right? I was reading a report from the Gibbs Responsible Finance Initiative, and they asked a couple of respondents. Well, first, their estimation is that the ESD space is between 20 and 30 billion, somewhere there, and ED would be 1/3 of that, and then the other one would be supplier development. So I'm not talking about supplier development. Maybe I'll talk about it one day. So 1/3 of it. So we're talking a couple of billions. So if couple of billions, and there's no measurement in terms of companies are not transparent. There's no legislature that says, hey, you should make sure that over 51% of the set funds go directly to entrepreneurs. Then it's open to fraud. So this report also was saying, or at least the respondents in it were saying, this whole ESD industry is full of fraud, and I guess it's dressed within a corporate mechanism, and corporate people can use fancy language to hide their scams or inefficiencies. So it's just one of those things. My solution would be somehow this needs to be legislated, or it needs to be a rule that greater than 50% of the funds should go directly to the entrepreneurs. But I'm not here talking about the said solution, because the solution is just evident. If not more than 50% of the said funds, 51% of ED funds, if they're not going to entrepreneurs, then it's fraudulent. It's an industrial complex. Popular, you would know of the military industrial complex, in that they manufacture, start wars, accusations, so that they could sell weapons. We remember the Iraqi war. It was said first that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, meaning nuclear weapons, and there were examiners that went to check whether the Iraq has those. Saddam Hussein allowed them. I think South Africa or South African scientists were part of that, along with the whole not African Union, man, with the UN, and they found that there were no such weapons. And then the rhetoric moved from weapons of mass destruction to preemptive strikes, meaning they're going to strike them before they get to produce those nuclear weapons. And the war happened, and later we learned that a lot of companies made money. They were charging insane amounts, 10x type of amounts to the American government. That's an industrial complex. So ED also would fall under that, because there's no measurement, right? One of my favorite authors, actually, let me just read a quote from him. I opened the article with it. It's on my blog, this article. Entrepreneurs are a hero in our society. They fail for the rest of us. Now imagine the entrepreneurs, the one taking the risk, and then they get the fraction of ED funds, right? And then everyone has got fancy offices in Sandton. They still get salaries that were being paid in their previous other corporate jobs, and it's just a nice scam if that's the case. Because I don't if ever someone was to disagree with me or disagree with you, if you share the sentiment that ESD is corrupt or it's a scam, ask them to tell you how much their program or the program that they work with, what percentage, what ratio does their whole fund, how is it structured? What is it? Does 51% go to entrepreneurs, or is the other way around? Right? And that simple test, it's telling, really. So Nassim Taleb calls this the Soviet Harvard delusion, wherein he gives an example that you'd find, so-said scientists trying to teach birds how to fly. It doesn't work like that. Birds you have to let them go and they will learn how to fly. That's entrepreneurs. You can't, sometimes I'm thinking that even the word enterprise development tends to be a bit of an oxymoron, but that's just me looking at linguistics, because, well, entrepreneurship is a doing spot. The entrepreneurs will be doing something and then give them the funds. There must be a bit of a criteria in terms of whether you decide to give this one or that one, and the one that's doing something that brings in a bit of money, or whatever metric you use. I wonder what that metric would be. Give them the money, give them more of the money, and then let them fail, because that's the only way you'll find out whether something works or not. When maybe talking about social programs, CSI, corporate social investment, I'm not talking about that. Maybe more than 51% would go to support or whatever, but I don't know the justification for that. But I'm talking about enterprise development. Like I said, Nassim calls it, or this sort of setups, Soviet Harvard delusion, wherein actually there's a quote here. He says, teaching a bird how to fly instead of helping. Well, no, I'm getting it wrong. He said teaching a bird to fly. I say instead of helping the bird mid-air. That's the entrepreneurs doing something, and fund whatever they're doing so that they could flourish or fail, whichever it is. Failure is given, right? You can't rule it out. You can't theoretically take it out. Things have to play in practice, right? I talk of the innovation imperative, wherein all costs, whether it's accounting, all support costs should be, their culmination, their aggregation should be less than 50% of the whole enterprise development, and then the rest should go to the entrepreneur. And then everyone who's submitting a tender to teach the entrepreneurs whatever thing, they should structure their program, the costs there too, in such a way that still it's below that the culmination, the aggregation of it, everything, it will still be below 51%, because now that's how you innovate, right? Otherwise you're not innovating. You are just playing in an industrial complex wherein you take more of the money that's supposed to go to the entrepreneur. I talked of a solution that somehow this should be mandated, that 51% of the funds go to the entrepreneur, and similar to a VC model I gave there. About 30% of whatever investments funds they receive goes to management, and then the rest, the chunk of the bigger chunk of whatever funds is remaining, around 70% goes to actual investments. Even this 30% is spent over a period of 4 to 10 years, 5 to 10 years, 7 to 10 years, in that sort of way. And then at least now the investors' money is secure, and that most of it goes to work. And I think with ED should operate similar to that, right? The principle that more goes to the entrepreneur should override anything else. And then that's when you'll see entrepreneurs really, getting value. People being selected, entrepreneurs being selected based on the business that have started, and then if they were doing well, and then I guess in such a situation the criteria will be that they get more of their money. But beyond everything, to me, well, it's just common sense. If entrepreneurs are not getting more than 51% of the funds, it's a scam. And I said I watch language quite carefully, and you have to watch language because people could use words that could deceive you, diversity, all those interventions that, those fancy words people use to deceive you, especially corporate people. You must not be fooled by such words. This is ED is a support mechanism. The support shouldn't take much of over 51% of the intended funds. It just does not make any logical sense, right? You need to work on making sure that the entrepreneurs get more of the funds. Otherwise, you are being wasteful. We get this sort of things when it's government doing it. Some years ago, I remember, I think it was the Department of Arts. I don't know if at that point it was already mixed with Department of Sports. Over, I think, 70% of the funds of their budget was going towards salaries and offices and all that. And people were mad at that. They're like, this is just crazy. And it happens with a lot of government departments. When it's government, we get that is corruption, that's inefficiency, that's a weight on, that's basically inflation. We get it when it's government, but for some reason in corporate, we don't really say such things. Like I've had my, stints working in ESD in a couple of ED, to be specific, in a couple of ways. I founded Startup Picnic Academy. We do trainings now and then, so I'm quite familiar with the terrain. So yeah. So the article is called "Is ESD a Scam? Over Mentored, Underfunded. Entrepreneurs say it's in an industrial complex that uses them as bait, feeding corporate staff and consultants while leaving them with only crumbs." It's on my website, disetomaluma.co.za. I've got a couple of other articles. I've got a series that I'm writing on BEE, so you can also check those out. And maybe some in the comments will come saying BE should be scrapped. I disagree technically, but I'm not making that argument here. I'm just precisely talking about enterprise development within ESD. So yeah, just